Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So nice to be with you. We're going to try to set our mood, our intention. It's been a crazy, crazy week for so many of us. Everything going on in the world and everything that's now happening in cities around the United States and on social media. So we're going to use music to take us to that place of Shabbat. Let the week kind of melt away as we move into this sacred time together, a time that has sustained our people for millennia.
Shabbat Shalom.
Rabbi Joel.
Shabbat Shalom, Cantor Lisa. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. It's good to be with you. It's good to be with everyone else who is joining us tonight for Koleinu. As you know, Koleinu means our voice. And so even though we're not physically together, we want to hear your voice by you typing. So already we can say Shabbat Shalom to Merle and Karen and Dina and Judith and Lynn, all of whom have already written something in the chat. So we hope that you will also find your voice and feel free to chime in and say whatever is on your mind. We'll have one or two prompts during the service for you to respond to if you'd like, but we want this to be somewhat engaging, not just between the Cantor and myself, but also with you in mind as well. So hopefully you'll join with us. We are in the book of Bamidbar. We are in the wilderness for the next month and a half or so. We are journeying through the wilderness. The bulk of our journey from Egypt to the Promised Land takes place in the book of Numbers. And the place, being in the wilderness, is a place that has both the feeling of potential comfort, right? Sometimes we can find comfort in the vastness of that open space. Anyone who's been to the desert, when you look up at those stars, how incredible it is when we get to leave the light pollution of Los Angeles and go out to Joshua Tree or go out to Palm Springs. Well, there's a lot of light pollution in Palm Springs, so never mind that part. But when you can get out and see the expansiveness of the wilderness and the world, it can bring some comfort. But there's also the opportunity, unfortunately, in the desert to become lost, to feel as though we have no way of navigating ourselves out of that desert. This week, I'd say the last couple of weeks, collectively and maybe personally has been a time of wandering, has been a time of being in the wilderness. But Shabbat comes along every week, even as we are in that wandering phase, to give us a little bit of a respite from that wandering, to allow us to center ourselves, to imagine that in that desert, there is an oasis that we can find. And at least for 24 hours, we can find sustenance and comfort and shade and all the things that we need to sustain us on that journey through the wilderness. So tonight really begins that for all of us with the beginning of Shabbat.
Beautiful. We're going to begin Shabbat together by welcoming some of our Wilshire Boulevard Temple. There's a plane going overhead. We'll deal with the noise. Our Wilshire Boulevard Temple, B'nai Mitzvah, we have Sydney Litt and her family, and Ella Schaefer and her family. Both Sydney and Ella will become bat mitzvah tomorrow, along with, I believe, 3 other families from Wilshire Boulevard Temple. So it is a busy weekend for us, but we are so excited to welcome you and your families to our virtual Shabbat service. We're very excited. I actually had the privilege of studying with both of these extraordinary young women. So I am just so proud of them and can't wait to begin Shabbat with them. So ladies, if you would like to join me in lighting your Shabbat candles, we'll welcome and invite the rest of our community to do the same as we bring in that much needed light of Shabbat. We bring in that light 3 times. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We sanctify our time together with our kiddush. We hold our cup in the palm of our hand because our cup is literally overflowing with all of the blessings that we have in our life. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uv'ratzon hinchilanu zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit ki hu yom techila lemikra'e kodesh zeichel yitziat mitzrayim kivanu v'charta ve'otanu kidashta mikol hamim ve'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uv'ratzon hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. L'chaim.
L'chaim.
And last but not least, Ella, Sydney, what kind of chalot are we working with tonight? What do we have? What's the challah specialty of the night? We join together in our... There. Ooh,
Oh, wow.
that is gorgeous.
Challah baker. So we made
Wait, can we get a close up of that,
we
please?
need a close up. I need smell-o-vision on that.
Wow.
Yeah. Whoa. Is that a double layered challah?
Double layered chocolate chip.
We've got ours coming.
That looks beautiful. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, let's see.
Her
Oh,
handiwork.
beautiful.
Oh, there we go.
I love it.
Nice.
Beautiful. Okay, we join together in our motzi blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Amen.
Dig in, girls. Take a bite of that double-layered chocolate
Wait,
challah.
But after you take your bite, before you leave, I have one question for both of you, Sydney and Ella. Since not everyone who's watching tonight will be at your bat mitzvah tomorrow, just in a sentence or two, what are you talking about tomorrow? What's your Devar Torah going to be teaching us tomorrow? Sydney has her mouth full. Ella, you're up first.
So mine is about the Israelites being pure to make a sacrifice to God.
Nice. And Sydney?
I'll be talking about what we leave behind as we move forward in life.
Man, Well, you both are welcome to come and lead services and give the Devar Torah anytime with those topics. So, Mazal Tov to both of you, your whole families, and enjoy tomorrow. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Shabbat shalom. Mazel tov. Shabbat shalom. Yeah, mazel tov.
So nice. Not only to see those beautiful challahs, but to hear the fact that there are 13-year-olds with deep wisdom who have a lot to teach us. And I know, I think I can probably speak for the Cantor myself, the fact that we get the privilege every single Shabbat to learn from these 13-year-olds. And it really is a gift for us. So as we think about this week, as we think about finding that oasis in the midst of the desert, we want to put up a prompt for you, which is, if you had to direct some more light into the world this week, thinking about how there have been those moments of darkness, especially I'm thinking about everything that's gone on in Israel, where would you shine a little bit more light on this Shabbat? Where would you direct it? Where would you like to direct more light into the world? So feel free to share your thoughts with us in the chat. We've had Melanie has joined us, and David and the Goldsmith family, and Nancy, so many other people who are already saying Shabbat Shalom. So add your voice as well to that, where you'd like to find more light and shine more light into the world.
And as we think about bringing that light into the world, we're going to move into our Kabbalat Shabbat service. It actually comes before the official Shabbat service, and it's the service in which we receive Shabbat. That the Kabbalists of our tradition knew that we couldn't just move from the craziness and the insanity of the week into that rest of Shabbat, that we needed a transition. And the Psalms of Kabbalat Shabbat are meant to be that transition. A reminder of God's power, a reminder that we're all connected as one, a reminder of that light that we need to bring in the world. So we're going to join together in Psalm 96, Yismechu Hashamayim. We imagine that all of nature is rejoicing on this Shabbat with us. Yismechu Hashamayim v'tagel haaretz yiram hayam השמיים ותגל הארץ ירם הים ומלואו יממי מים ממי יממי מים ממי יממי מים ממי מים ממי מים ממי יממי מים ממי יממי מים ממי יממי מים ממי transition into our next psalm, Romemu, we remember that this idea, this godliness, that holiness, that on Shabbat, we literally have to elevate it to a higher place. We're told in our tradition that on Shabbat that we get a second soul, which makes us extra, extra holy in order to think and reflect and to realize the responsibility that we have to bring holiness into this world. Romemu. Now that we've had our warm-up of Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Joel, I welcome you back to our Bima.
Thank you. That was a great mashup medley. I just want to share before we move on with Shalom Aleichem a few of the things that people wrote in terms of where would they like to shine some more light. We have Merle saying, remind people of what anti-Semitism is all about. Sam Rosen, Shabbat Shalom all from Mexico City. I'd shine more light to people of Gaza. May they be free from Hamas. Yes, and Sam, I feel like at one point you were in Europe, now you're in Mexico City. You're all over the world. Congrats, and I hope your travels are going well. And Lynn said, light the dark corners of those hearts feeling fear and hatred. So thank you for all of those. In a minute, we're going to be moving into Shalom Aleichem, this idea that we have an extra angel that joins us and guides us into the Shabbat experience. I wanted to share something from this week. I do these things called Torah Talks with the preschool. Every Wednesday I go and I meet with the preschool classes and I tell them a story and from the Torah, and we have a little conversation. And usually it's never enough time. These 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds and sometimes some of the 3-year-olds come running up to me afterwards. I keep them at a distance. We're all wearing masks. But they have all kinds of questions. They have all kinds of things they want to tell me. And so one of the teachers this week said, okay, class, we'll write some notes and questions to Rabbi Joel and we'll send them to him. So when I think about Shalom Aleichem, when I think about adding more light, to be surrounded by the light of Shabbat, I think one of the most wonderful things that children can teach us is that the inquisitiveness of their questions, the way in which they see the world is just so phenomenal. So I wanted to share a few of the comments, I should say, questions/comments that I got from some of these students this week that just added some joy to my life. Eli said, I want to tell him that, why did Moses get into a lot of trouble? He banged the staff onto the rock. Why does crocodiles have big teeth? That's a very good question. Nora wanted to tell him we're going to do ballet. I'm going to do ballerina class, said Romy. Why did Moses bang the rock? He was really mad. And I have a bounce house. I have a bouncy pillow at the end of my slide. And my mommy and daddy have 2 new cars. How did Moses bang the rock? I am staying at school late. It's just like the way in which their minds just go from one thing to the next. And usually during the week, we think that our minds are always racing way too much, that we want to slow it down. In these little kids' minds, that's just the way it goes. But as we grow up, we need this space. Shabbat comes to slow us down so that we don't necessarily have to go from one idea into the next right after the other, but that we can take a breath. So as we move into Shalom Aleichem, let's be surrounded by the joy and innocence of those young children, and also the idea that we can slow our minds just a little.
I want a bouncy house at the end of my slide. Where's my slide? The future. They're beautiful. Shalom Aleichem. We welcome in the angels of Shabbat. Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Hasharet, Malachi Elyon, Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem leshalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachi Elyon, Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni leshalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachi Elyon, Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzitchem leshalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachi Elyon, Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Hakadosh Baruch Hu, Hakadosh Baruch Hu, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. We move in our service to Lachadodi, the acrostic poem that greets the Shabbat bride. This melody that we're about to do, what I like to think, I don't know if any of you have ever been to Tzfat, but there's lots of stairs, and I think of Lachadodi and the different verses that we do. Tonight we're going to do 1, 2, and 9, but there's many more that come in between. But that with each verse, we ascend a little bit higher up that staircase, that spiritual staircase all the way to get to God's presence and to holiness. So we welcome in the Sabbath bride, we welcome in Shabbat 1, 2, and we'll stand for verse 9. Lecha dodi likrat kala yalalai 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 b'nei Shabbat lekabelai lecha dodi likrat kala yalalai 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 b'nei Shabbat lekabelai shamor v'zachor v'dibur echad yishmiyanu el hameyuchad Adonai echad u'shemo echad v'shemu tiferet v'li tekilah lecha dodi likrat kala yalalai 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 b'nei Shabbat lekabelai lecha dodi likrat kala yalalai 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 b'nei Shabbat lekabelai לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה כי היא מקור הברכה מראש מקדם נסוכה סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה לך דודי לקראת כלה יללי 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 בני שבת לקבלה Yalalai, b'nei Shabbat, Kabbalat. I invite you to rise wherever it is you are, or just sit a little bit taller as we welcome in Shabbat. Boi v'shalom, ateret ba'ala, gam b'simcha u'b'tzola. תוך אמוני עם סגולה בואי חלה לך דודי לקראת כלה יללי 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 בני שבת לקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה יללי 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 בני שבת Yalalai, 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 b'nei Shabbat, lekabelai, lecha dodi likrat kala, yalalai, 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 b'nei Shabbat, lekabelai.
We remain standing. We remain a little straighter in our chairs. We continue now with Baruch Hu, our call to prayer.
Now that we're all standing as one, I invite you to close your eyes, and we're going to take 3 deep breaths in as we prepare to recite the words of the Shema together as one united people. Take a deep breath in and let that out. Deep breath in. Let that out. One last deep breath in. Let it out. The words of the Shema are what connect all of us, all of the different voices, all of the different opinions that is Am Yisrael, that at the end of the day, these words connect us as one, and that one is connected to God, to holiness, the divine, however it is that you imagine. But it means that we are all one. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. We join together in the chanting of the Ve'ahavta. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavecha ubechol nafshecha ubechol meodecha ve'hayu הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
There were a few comments earlier about Cantor Lisa's Shabbat message, so hopefully you've had a chance to read that or you'll read it a little later. One of the things she talks about is the growing anti-Semitism that we're feeling a little more so at this moment, even though it's always been there. I read an article today about this hashtag that's come out, hashtag COVID-1948. In other words, this anti-Semitic way of combining the birth of the country of Israel with the COVID pandemic, really a way to bring more pain and anger, at least to my life. I saw a quote somewhere that it was shared 175 times per minute for over 4 hours last week, right? So something like that can spread like wildfire online, and how much we have to work to educate to overcome the ignorance that exists among so many. And as Cantor Lisa pointed out, even those amongst our own Jewish community who struggle to recognize that, as we do with the Shema, that we are one. We can't find freedom for any oppressed people. And we as Jews are never going to feel a sense of safety if we don't speak out, if we don't raise our voices to the things that happen in our midst, like what happened outside that sushi restaurant earlier this week here in Los Angeles, like the many things that happen around the world on a regular basis that point to us as the cause of the problems of the world, when in fact, I believe that Judaism and the wisdom of the Torah have the ability to cure the problems of the world. So how can we lean into that? How can we fight that? How can we imagine, as we do in a moment with Mi Chamocha, imagining that there is a sea in front of us? It is a wild sea. It is one in which we many times as Jews feel as though there is no chance that we can cross through to the other side. And every day, though, we are reminded that despite those challenges, despite the vitriol that we may see online, despite the vitriol and the hatred that we may see in our streets, that as a Jewish people, it is hope, it is optimism that allows us to stand at that sea and dip our toe in and believe that that sea can part, that it can spread itself out to allow us to walk through, to allow all people to walk through to a place of safety, to a place of love, to a place of hope.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh, nora tehilot oseh fele, nora tehilot oseh fele, nora tehilot oseh fele, nora tehilot oseh fele. Chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh, nora tehilot oseh fele, nora tehilot oseh fele. Part of our Shabbat liturgy comes from Torah, and that is the words of Vishamru. We're told that God created the world in 6 days, and on the seventh day God rested, and therefore we must as well. This week has felt endless to so many of us. And it is so imperative that as we're on that treadmill of life, going from thing to thing, even in a virtual world, I don't know about many of you, but I'm busier than I've ever been. Zoom meetings, phone calls, having to go on campus, not on campus, that at the end of a long week, it's not just that we have to do Shabbat, it's that we have to, in order to prepare for that next week, in order to take on that task of bringing holiness into the world, in order to center ourselves so that we can continue our life, we have to welcome in that stillness of Shabbat. Because I said earlier in the service, Shabbat is what has sustained our people, the Jewish people, for decades, for millennia, and it's what will sustain you into your future as well. So we join together in the words of Vishamru and welcome the stillness of Shabbat. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ. וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש.
This next set of prayers, the Amidah, is our standing prayer. It is our moment to really continue the work of Mi Chamocha, of imagining us standing up and crossing that sea. It's the continuation of this idea of shomer, of guarding and of keeping the values and what's important to us alive and well in our lives. So we continue now as we rise or we sit up a little straighter for the Amidah.
Anana na 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 Adonai. Anana na 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 Svaitai Tiftach. Anana na 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 Ufi Yagid. Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha. Anana na 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 Adonai. Anana na 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 Svaitai Tiftach. Anana na 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 Ufi Yagid. Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha. We take a moment for the private meditations and prayers of your heart.
Thank God there's a ceasefire in Israel right now between Israel and Hamas. I hope it stays that way, praying for that. But there's not necessarily a ceasefire to all of the pain, to all of the healing that needs to be done in the world, not only in Israel and for all the innocent victims that are in the Strip, but also all of those in our country, in our city, around the world who are in need of healing. And so Misha Berach is our opportunity, and please feel free to add names to our chat so we can be thinking about all the loved ones and all the people whom you're thinking of who need some extra love, who need prayers of strength and of support.
May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Bisheberach imotenu mekor habracha leyom renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
I want to share the names of those who need that healing right now. Helen Mayer, Debbie Simmons and Dan Weir, Tracy Miller-Murphy, Dan Weir, Nicole Leah Alkov, Reggie and Chad, Amy Jo Friedman and Barry Rabinowitz, Marlene Barrow, John Lapidus, Barbie Wiener, Stanley Feldman, Rand Blatt, Art for his wife Judith, and Alan Schlossberg, along with Muriel Blankfort, Nancy Radin, Karen Ludwig, Faith Gomberg, and Paulette Hawkins. So sending prayers and healing to all of them and many others. If it wasn't for everything that was going on in Israel this past week, I think we probably would have spent a little bit more time in the Jewish community talking about the Pew study that was released last week. It's every 7 or 8 years that the Pew Research Foundation puts out new research about the Jewish community. The last time was in 2013. And so they just released the new data and their new report last week. They surveyed about 4,700 Jews from all across the country over the course of a year or so. They found that there are 7.5 million Jews in the United States, so about 2% of our population. And they had a lot of findings that I wanted to briefly, we could spend a lot of time, and I am going to put in the chat for you, so you have the link if you do want to go and spend lots of time on your own, or not as much time and just read the briefings. You can go and find the report yourself and go into to look at that yourselves. But I want to point out a few things that I found interesting that you can reflect on the Shabbat. And I think for those of us who work in the Jewish community, and those of you who are tuning in to a service on a Friday night, you are a rare breed in the Jewish world. So you should be very proud of the fact that you are representing the Jewish people, at least statistically, in the Facebook and YouTube streaming world. So here are a few things that I wanted to point out that were interesting based on the research that came out. The first comes to the topic of intermarriage. I kind of created a few categories and a few of the many data points that exist out there. 61% of Jews right now have a non-Jewish spouse, compared to 18% of Jews who got married before 1980. So as we can tell, there are more and more people who are marrying someone who is not Jewish. Among married Jews who say they have one Jewish parent, 82% have a non-Jewish spouse, compared to 34% of those who report that both of their parents were Jewish. And the majority of Jews married to people of a different background raise their children Jewish. One of the things about when we look at statistics is, can we look at it? How do you read the analysis, and how do you take that data and analyze it? So what we see here, I think, with intermarriage is the idea that, yes, there is growing intermarriage in this country among the Jewish community. And at the same time, there are many interfaith couples who are raising their children as Jewish. What does it mean for the Jewish community to embrace those interfaith couples and to help them to raise their children as Jews? And at the same time, how do we help those people who are not yet married to see the benefit and the opportunities that come with marrying another Jew? So that's just a little bit of the research on interfaith. And then when we turn related to interfaith is this idea of affiliation. What does it mean to be affiliated? In other words, those who pay dues, so to speak, to a Jewish organization such as a synagogue. Younger Jews are more likely than older Jews to identify as Orthodox, and more likely to say they do not belong to any particular branch of Judaism. The next generation that's coming up is either becoming more traditional, or they're deciding they don't want to opt in to the institutional structure that has existed now for decades. So how are we going to address that? About 4 in 10 Jews ages 18 to 29 identify as Reform or conservative, compared with 7 in 10 Jews who are 65 and older. So what does that mean? That, in other words, there are less, even though Reform and conservative Judaism still serve as the major denominations in the Jewish world, there are less and less who are affiliating with certain denominations. Does that mean denominations are going to disappear? Probably not. Does that mean that people's identity as a Jew is going to be based on what synagogue they grew up at? Probably not. More and more Jews are not willing to put themselves in a denominational box, so to speak. More than half of Jews who do not belong to a synagogue say they express their Jewishness in other ways. So that is a good sign, the sign that we should be happy, the fact that even if someone is not a part of the synagogue, there are many ways, as we already know, to express your Judaism, and many people are doing just that. And that members of different branches of American Judaism generally do not feel they have a lot in common with one another. This is a challenge. How do we understand the fact that me as a Reform Jew and my neighbor, who is an ultra-Orthodox Jew, how do we find that middle ground? How do we find that place where we do feel as though we are connected to one another and we are connected to the same Judaism? Is that possible or not? I think the next 10 years will be a sense where is that growing wider apart, or are there things that we can do in the Jewish community to help people of different denominations and different ideologies feel as though they are connected to one another? But I do think that it seems to be a growing challenge in the Jewish world. Diversity is a really interesting subject. 8% of the Jews surveyed identify with other racial or ethnic categories. And among Jews ages 18 to 29, the share who identify as a race or ethnicity other than non-Hispanic white rises to 15%. There is a growing number of Jews in our community who are Jews of color or who are not white Ashkenazi Jews. And what does that mean for us as a Jewish community to realize, as we should have for a long time, but we've kind of, I think, forgotten for the most part, that a Jew is not someone who is just white, that there are many, many colors and stripes of what it means to be Jewish, and we have to remember that. Overall, 17% of Jews surveyed, including 29% of Jewish adults under the age of 30, live in households in which at least one child or adult is Black, Hispanic, Asian, some other non-white race or ethnicity, or multiracial. How do we, not only in our synagogue, but how do synagogues, how do Jewish institutions, how does the general Jewish community come to recognize that when you see someone who doesn't look exactly like you, they also may be Jewish? That the way in which we start to identify with one another in the Jewish community needs to start to shift a little. When it comes to Israel, a large majority of US Jews, 82%, say caring about Israel is either essential or important. That's a good thing. About 6 in 10 say they are at least somewhat attached to Israel. So that's a positive mark, that there's still at least a number of Jews who really do feel as though their connection to Israel is important. But just over 6 in 10 Jews say they think a way can be found for Israel and an independent Palestinian state to coexist peacefully. That's a decent number, at least it's above 50%. But I think this is a sign that we continue to lose a little bit of hope in the fact that there can be some way for Jews and for Israelis and Palestinians to live side by side. And Jewish Democrats and Democratic leaners were much more likely than Jewish Republicans and GOP leaners to say the US was too supportive of Israel. I think that's a real challenge that we face, those of us who live here in Southern California. And regardless of your political beliefs, the fact that there is a growing number of people who say the US is too supportive of Israel can be problematic for us down the road as well. Anti-Semitism, as we've alluded to already tonight, 3/4 of American Jews think there is more anti-Semitism in the US today than there was even 5 years ago. And just over half say that as a Jewish person in the US, they personally feel less safe than they did 5 years ago. Again, we can't underestimate the fact that anti-Semitism is alive and well, and it is a stain that we must constantly be working on within the Jewish community and to create allies and partners outside the Jewish community to support us. But the fact that there are more and more of us who feel unsafe because of this growing anti-Semitism is a real issue that we need to be thinking about. So as I wrote in the chat, you can find all the details at Pew Jewish Americans in 2020 if you want to do a little bit of research. I don't want to take too much time to analyze all of that. I know that was a lot of information, but in general, I am both hopeful and I am scared about the future of the Jewish people here in the US. I think we have always dealt with Judaism as both a religion and as a culture. Those who say, I'm not religious, I'm not going to go to synagogue because I'm not religious, even though we do need to change that language, because I think we need to redefine and and hold on to the idea that religiosity is not something that is relegated to orthodoxy, but is something that we as Reformed Jews can also maintain and uphold. But that there are disturbing trends when it comes to anti-Semitism, when it comes to the fact that there are slowly but a growing number of people who feel as though the U.S. is too supportive of our homeland, and at the same time, opportunities that come with intermarriage and those families and finding ways of integrating them into the Jewish community, ways in which we can see the diversity of the Jewish community here in the United States, Jews of color, Jews of all ethnicities. How can we continue to open up our tents, to open up our arms and bring more and more people into the fold, even if they're not going to belong to a synagogue, that there is such a breadth and depth of the Jewish community out there. And for me, amongst all the challenges that we're facing right now, this report actually at the end of the day does give me hope, does inspire me that not only as a Jewish professional do I have a lot of work to do, but that we collectively, if we are willing to be innovative, if we are willing to take some of the things that have always just been done the way they've been done in the Jewish world, and we start to play with those a little and start to challenge those forms a little, that we can do some incredible work together. And so those are just a few things from the Pew study that I wanted to share with you tonight. And feel free to reach out if you want to talk about any of them in more depth. If you have thoughts on any of this, I'd love to hear from you. With that, I want to just transition to a few announcements before we conclude our service tonight. There are a lot of things going on. The first, this Sunday morning, we have the opportunity to partner with Story Pirates. It's a great podcast. My kids love it. It's really just basically what happens is little kids send in stories, the most ridiculous, amazing stories, similar to those little notes that I showed you earlier. Imagine 4 and 5-year-olds writing stories and then sending them in. And then a group of actors takes those stories, changes them, develops them a little, and then performs them on this podcast. Well, on Sunday morning, we have the opportunity to work with the Story Pirates podcast and to write letters back to those children who send in all those adorable stories, because each of them receives a note from Story Pirates, and those are not automated. They are personalized. And so we're going to do a little workshop for 1 hour. If you are 15 years old or up, you can join us and not only read some adorable stories, but really make some children smile by crafting a letter that will go back to them. And you will be part of this personalization of making stories come to life. So feel free to sign up. It was at the bottom of the Shabbat message today. We'd love to have you join us for that. Monday night, the night before the 1-year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd, there's going to be an incredible program. As you can see right there, Rabbi Susan Nanis is going to be moderating along with 3 panelists discussing 1 year after the death of George Floyd. Where are we now? What do we need to be thinking about? So please feel free to tune into that as well. We are moving back in person with Shabbat services starting in a few weeks. On June 4th, we are having a special Shabbat that is not going to be in person, that really is going to incorporate all the clergy of our institution and officially blend the university, synagogue, and Wilshire Boulevard temple communities together. So that's going to be a special Shabbat. And the week after that, starting the second week in June, we are going to be offering limited seating for in-person services. We're still going to be doing an online service live. But in addition to that, we'll have an opportunity for those who sign up, first come, first serve, to join us in person every Friday night. Live music, a real life Rabbi and Cantor in front of you, the opportunity to schmooze a little. So we're going to be doing that all throughout the summer. And Cantor, Peicott, and I are going to be doing a rooftop ruach 3 times this summer, 1 time in June, July, and August on the roof of the Glazer campus in Koreatown. At 7 p.m., we're going to be offering a service with our Koleinu band, who we miss very much. And we'll have the opportunity for everyone to be up there, watch the sunset, look at the mountains, hear some music. So that's one of those offerings as well. I'm sure there are other things, but that's all I got time for right now. We're going to move now towards the conclusion of our service. And we're going to do so beginning by thinking about those in the period of Shloshim and those whose yahrzeits we are remembering this Shabbat. We begin by remembering those who have passed away in the past month, the period of Shloshim. Eli Broad, Lely Cordova, Carolyn Tamar Davidson, Rabbi Morley Feinstein, Len Foreman, Marjorie Gould, Gary Kelson, Carol Grace Salinas, Don Schwartz, Norma Joy Siegel. On this Shabbat, we commemorate the following yahrzeits: Marion Burke Allen, Lena Barkin, Jack Barnes, Irving Barron, Jenny Berman, Jonathan Blitz, Janice Brooks, Ann Brown, Sandra Brown, Vanessa Brown, Janice Catafo, Alan Chatkin, Morton Cohen, Raul Kokoru, Marion Corday, Henche Corper, Levi Corper, Ramat Dagan, Samuel Dickman, Marie Dulgener, Helen Doran, Helen Epstein, Samuel Epstein, Gerald Bruce Fetterman, Burton Fine, Felix Fells, Oscar Fern, Bernard Friedman, Millicent Friedman, Doris Frost, Jenny Gable, Adolf Gansfried, Dorothy Gidlow, Ira Glassman, Herman Glick, Robert Edward Gordon, Fanny Gordon, Phil Gore, Samuel Gordon, Charlotte Clayman Green, Richard Gross, Louis Hausman, Francis Hendon, Betty Heyman, Barbara Hornicher, Relba Immerman, Samuel Itzhaki, Rose Jaffe, Ruth Katz, Laura Keith, Beatrice Commissar, Gerald Levin, Lester Levy, David Lubitz, Victor Ludwig, Winifred Melman, Lenore Meltzer, Diana Menzer, Monafar Danesh Mogadan, Edna Mosk, Blanche Nevitt, Betty Bemmel Knight, Arthur Platt, Philip Rand, Paul Rosenthal, Shirley Ross, Alan Rowe, Frida Sade, Mel Saltzman, Philip Sandler, Marjorie Schwartz, Bertha Shapiro, Samuel Shapiro, Sarah Shapiro, Louis Sherman, Esther Shore, Nettie Shrallow, Lawrence Silberkleit, Blanche Sklar, Oscar Srer, Jenny Rose Stein, Selma Stone, Izzy Title, Sorrel Trope, Ernest Warsow, Emily Weinfeld, Murray Weingrod, Geraldine Woolworth, Melvin Wyckoff, Harvey Yatman, Gablan Farhan Zawadeh, Anita Zellman. We also think of all the innocent people who have died in the conflict between Israel and Hamas. We now join together in the Mourner's Kaddish. Yikadal v'yikadash Shemei Rabbah, Be'alma divrach chirutei, ve'amlich malchutei, B'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye d'chol Beit Yisrael, Ba'gala uvizman kariv v'imru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam olmei almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, V'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal Shmei d'kudesha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru, Amen. Yehei shlama rabba m'shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, Amen.
We're going to conclude our service with a prayer for peace, the words of Oseh Shalom. May the one who makes peace in the heavens bring peace, lasting peace here on earth. Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Amen. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
Nothing can drown out that hope for peace. No helicopters, nothing.
No helicopters, no nothing.
No
You're
nothing.
crazy tonight. Shabbat shalom, everyone. Thank you so
Shabbat
much for
shalom.
joining us for services. Wishing you a restful weekend and a rest of your Shabbat.
Shabbat shalom. Good night.
Good night.